Hi and welcome back. Today is a wrap up. And at the start of the year, I decided I was going to do a wrap up every 2 months and put the 2 months together because I don't read a whole lot. I read quite a bit in April, but these 2 months blended together towards the end of March, and so I'm not sure what days I'm not sure when my reading for the month ended and when the next one started, so I'm just gonna start because I read 10 books and I want to say that I kept to my okay, so in the first 2 months I read 3 books in January, 3 books in February, and then for the last 2 months I read 10 books. I don't think it was 10 books in 1 month, 10 books in another. And when I say books, 2 of them weren't actually proper books. One was a poetry collection, the other was a short story. But because they're both, well, of course the poetry collection is a book, but it was so short that it kind of fills in a gap a bit, where instead of usually my books are 200 plus pages and can reach to 500 pages, so it's not so impressive where I've read 10 books around 300 to 400 pages each. No, it's just been, it's been all over the place, just a little bit. So the first one I believe was getting Goodreads up because I don't remember much. So the first read was Only Mostly Devastated by Sofia Gonzalez. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It's written by an Australian author, but it's set in America. It's about it's kind of like a Grease retelling, except it's gay. So 2 boys meet, had a summer fling, basically. Then the boy that's out ends up going to the same school as the other boy who's not out, and then more or less all of the same tension and stuff that happens in Greece happens in this book. It was really cute. I said it was a cute, fluffy, coming-of-age romance, and that was the extent of my review. I read this on an app, and so I technically read this before it was released. I saw some weird promotion on Instagram and I ended up reading it before it was released in installments. The next, The Tempest by Shakespeare. I have to read this for uni. It I give it 2 stars. It wasn't bad, but for Shakespeare it was bad. I've read worse things this year, evidently, from my last wrap-up video, which I'll link in the description box down below. I'll have a little tag thingy up here. Anyway, had to read it for uni. I have to write essays on it. I wrote an essay on it. It was shit. I had to be 2,000 words. It was nowhere near 2,000 words. It wasn't even near the 10%. But my reference list, that's not supposed to be included in word counts, but some teachers do, but I don't think it is for honours. But I'm just at this point in my studies where I'm just like, I fucking can't. I can't do it anymore. Yeah, my reference list took it closer to the 10%, but yeah, it won't be included to word count. It's just a really, it's not a confusing play. At first it kind of is. If I read this without, it was kind of an audiobook. I listened to an audio reenactment of it on YouTube because it is a play. But anyway, I was able to keep up with what was going. The convictions behind the character decisions, I was like, not cutting it for me, son. So it was just, yeah. The next one I read was the second installment. I don't even know what this series, it's called the Valentine series. The second in the series, Ironheart by Jodie McAllister. I give it 5 stars. It was a whirlwind of teen angst and fairies and anger. Very much angry girl. So if you're able to get your hands on this series, I highly recommend that you do. Going from characters where I didn't understand the actions behind, the decisions behind their actions, into this book, I was like, hits the spot. There's so much weight behind these characters, you can't help but be invested in them. Yeah, so highly enjoyable. Have not read the last one yet. And my friend that has read it said she was broken after reading it, I think. We'll find out whenever I can get my hands on the last one. The next one is Taking Down Evelyn Tate. Yes, by Poppy Nwosu. I did a whole review on this. I will also link this one in the description box down below and somewhere else on this screen. Yes, it is a bit of a long review. Mostly because it's also a reading vlog, so it's a reading vlog throughout and then a review at the end. My thoughts were all over the place in that one. I feel like it was, but the review, I feel, does end up covering a lot of my thoughts on the book. Go and check it out. You can just skip through the review if you want, the reading vlog if you want to get to the review at the end, or you can just put it on in the background, have a cup of tea, read along with me. I have a little section in the middle where I'm talking a little bit at the start, so the rest is more or less just chill vibes in the background and chill music. So come read with me. The next one I read on my Kindle. Ages ago I heard about this book on BookTube. It's an independently published fantasy book and I went to go buy it, and it's available on Amazon. I went to go buy it, but it doesn't ship to Australia. So I was very upset about that. But when I got my Kindle, it was literally the first book I bought because I'm able to on Kindle. I read it and wow. It's Beauty and the Beast retelling. I'll rephrase that. I don't like Beauty and the Beast. Not the original Disney film, not the remake of the original Disney film. Although I haven't really watched it, I've watched bits and pieces of it. I wasn't any more convinced by the story than I was in the original. To me, I just see it as literally Stockholm Syndrome. Problematic, yeah. The first song, I think it's the first song, or where she's singing about living in a provincial town and what more is there to life. Firstly, pretentious, but I kind of vibe with it, so fun. And then Gaston that song is top notch. That is like peak Disney. I will love it forever. I will also love Be Our Guest forever. The rest of the film, after Be Our Guest, I'm not interested. Anything that I like from the second half of the film is the fucking library. Sorry for swearing, but it's just the library. These are my emotions for Beauty and the Beast retellings. I think it's a bit I think it's a bit telling as well that I don't really like retellings as well as the original. It's because A Court of Thorns and Roses, the most popular, I feel, Beauty and the Beast retelling, iffy for me. But this one, Heart of the Fae, I actually really, really liked it. And I read this when I was my most anxious about uni and world stuff. And I devoured it, I feel. How quickly did I read it? Tell me reading dates. Oh, okay. I read it in 7 days. Which... Actually, no, that's a little long for me. I don't know how I read so much during April and March. Wait, March and April. Yeah, anyway, I like, towards the end, I was reading it almost every minute of the day. I had a bath at one point to relax, and I took my Kindle into the bath with me, and that's not something I usually do, but I did. So that was great. At first, I really, really liked it. The idea, although a retelling, was so fresh to me, it was interesting. There was a lot of small details that I feel like a lot of self-published books miss. But that was all in the setup. And then once it got to the storyline, it kind of just went all over a lot of details that I felt like could have been more explored. The relationship between the two main characters could have been explored more. I like this one also because it wasn't like a prisoner sort of situation. It was more of a, she went there on a quest basically, and then the king of the place, he's a prince, he's a prince in his world, but then on this island he's king. I don't know, it's a weird situation to explain. My books almost fell. Again. Yeah, so it's not like he kept her there against her will. It was more like, I'm not leaving here until I get what I want. But also, being there, it was kind of hard for her to just suddenly be back home, because to get to this island that's in between the human world and the fairy world, she had to go through some shit. And that was all interesting to read. Oh, I have a favourite character from that series, that book. It is a series, but I've only read the one. I have a favourite character from that, and whoo, he's kind of like, he's not like Reese at all, if we're going to draw comparisons between every book in Sarah J Maas's books, because I feel like that's a lot, that happens a lot now. He was just sarcastic and fun to read, had a traumatic past, all that jazz. What was his name? Bran? Bran. Love it. It also plays with Irish mythology. I think it's Irish mythology. Yes. Yes. So when I rated this book, because I loved the start, and then the ending kind of tapered off for me because it skipped through a lot of important stuff, especially the tension and the romance building between the two main characters, which, what grabs me in a book when it's got two characters that end up together, basically, or don't end up together, but when there's like a relationship between them at some point, I always look for the depths in tension, and then if it's romantic, which often it is, if it's romantic, all the little actions that happen that build up to it. I've gone on so long about the building of this book rather than about this book. Anyway, so for those reasons, I wrote in my review, This one is a hard one to rate, but I'll leave it at a 4-star. At the start it was 5, and then at the end it was more like a 3, and I didn't want to leave it a 3.5 because other books that I've read in the past that I've read rated as a 3.5, this one was better than that. So it was a hard situation. So I've just left it at a plain 4. Yes. So the first half was like extremely polished for a self-published book, and then the second half got a little messy. So it just seemed pretty rushed, which is evident because the storyline was also rushed at the end. After that, I jumped straight into Radians by Grace Draven. Draven? Yes? I don't know, it is now. Radians. At the time that I heard about A Heart of the Fae, I heard about this one as well. It was in the same recommendation video, which was by Jean's Bookish Thoughts. I'll link that one down below too. I'm creating so much work for myself, but credit where credit is due, because these books were actually pretty decent for self-published. Like, these were, if I'm going to compare it to a traditionally published book, they weren't as polished, they could have been more developed, they could have been more explored, they could have been more meat. There were minor grammar, spelling stuff. From an editing point of view, I personally, if I were the editor, I would have done a fair few structural edits. But we're going past that. So independently published, same video, back on track, trying to get my thoughts together because I'm trying to rush through this as well because I just know. I always talk about books forever, so you know. Anyway, I'm trying to be quick. I heard about them at the same time, obviously, and I went to go buy them at the same time because why wouldn't I? Obviously didn't get Heart of Fae physically, a physical copy of Heart of the Fae for reasons that I've stated, but I could get this one. So I've been holding on to these books for over a year. I remember I bought them while I was at uni, but I don't remember if I bought them in my second year or my third year. Honestly, it's likely that I bought them in my second year. So over 2 years, I don't know, one of the two of those. So I've had this forever, but I slept on it. Mainly because I always have my hesitations about self-published. Even though I did buy it, I always have my doubts. Because I know, by no fault of their own, it's the reason why traditionally published books through houses go through a lot of rounds of editing, but obviously with independently published, the focus isn't so much on editing. Anyway, I've lost my train of thought. I'm gonna put my phone on silent. Yeah, at one point I lost my train of thought on that one. Yeah, so that's the reason why I never started this until I saw some tweets that said that this was friends to lovers in a good way. Not, well, I mean, the trope is never bad, I would say, but traditionally, not traditionally, just statistically up on my shelves, a lot of them have been enemies to lovers, or not quite enemies, just strangers to lovers, not friends to lovers or best friends to lovers, because often I'm there for the tension, and often friends to lovers don't have as much tension as enemies to lovers. Look, there's gonna be tension, like in my other read of the month, tension in friends to lovers. But I didn't know I needed the friends and lovers that Grace Draven wrote until I read it for myself and witnessed it. It was actually pretty fucking top notch. And I'm swearing again. Mainly because it's not that the two races that they are, so human and then Kai. So they're two separate species essentially. So they're not quite enemies, but they're getting married. It's an arranged marriage to solidify the union between these two species essentially, and the kingdoms of these species specifically. It's not that they were enemies, and it's not that they were much friends beforehand, but at the start they meet for the first time, not knowing who each other were, and they were honest with each other about how hideous they looked like to each other. Like, the blurb talks about how they both find one another ugly, but it's so much better witnessing it in the first chapter and then seeing the two of them be like realizing who each other are was just, oh, it was so good. And then I actually got addicted to this. I don't think I put it down until I finished it, more or less. I slept. I ate. I don't think I did any uni work because I just couldn't. All I could do was read. It was actually so good. I didn't really doubt it that it would be good. Besides like storyline and it being polished, but the relationship between the two, honestly, I think that the ending could have been better. I think towards the end it was rushed. There could have been way more. The start, like, there just could have been so much more. I'm not quite convinced by the storyline that's going to unfold in the second book. I've read the blurb for the second book and I'm like, it goes away, it seems like it's going away from where it originally started, which is the romance, the relationship, I mean, blossoming between these two. So, anyway, long story short, pretty sure I gave it a 4.5. Let me double check. And while it's all loading, the tension between these two, even as friends, was really good, because you could tell at one point they loved each other, but they still weren't at that point. And it's just like, wow, these two are really caring and protecting for each other without knowing, right? Huh? I give this 4.5. I was right. Was annoyed at one point though, because it was legitimately missing 5 pages. It was missing 5 pages. It's not that it had like fallen out, because I hadn't touched this book in, like, the last time I touched the book more or less was when I bought it. It arrived and I put it on my shelf. I touched it like once or twice to read the blurb in between reading it and buying it, but I would have noticed if pages had fallen out. There was no tears, it just wasn't there. And if it weren't getting to a part where I knew something was going to happen, I maybe would have been like, okay, I'll skip it. I'll skip the whole 5 pages. But I couldn't, because I knew something was gonna happen. And then, so my solution was to buy it on the Kindle. So I spent money on that. Thankfully it was only like $3 or $4 or something. So I bought it on the Kindle for 5 pages, but I'm glad because something important did happen. So, you know, that's what happens. What did I read next? I think I read a short story next. Yes, I did. I read Galatea by Madeline Miller. So for honours, I'm doing Greek retellings. Madeline Miller is like the champion of Greek retellings. One of, because evidently I have a lot of authors that have done retellings. Yes, so I read this for honours, but I'm glad I read it not just for that. It was like, it was part for honours, part for, you know, enjoyment. I didn't just look at it from an analytical eye. Oh, and boy, did it make me so mad. It made me so mad. It fueled I always have this small fire burning where I just hate what men have done and how men act and how they continue to act. Feminism, wow. Literally, books just fell. Literally the driving force of, like, one of the driving forces of issues surrounding feminism. Dust falling around. So it just made me so mad while reading it, but it was so good. I gave it a 5 stars. Like, it honestly, it was so good. So short. You can buy it for like $1.50, $2 Australian, just for this short story online, like Kindle version. And Australian dollars shit right now, so in American it would be much cheaper. I think in pounds it's cheaper as well. So if you're interested, please check it out. I haven't been able to find like an online free version, but it's worth paying for. Next I read, I believe was the poetry collection. No, it wasn't. I read Love and Luck by Jenna Evans Welch. It was a fluffy YA romance, kind of. It wasn't so much romance in it, actually. That's why I give it a 3 stars. Would I give it a 3 or 3.5? Let's check. Goodreads, please add half ratings. Okay, so it was 3.5. So it's about this girl with her family goes to Ireland for her aunt's wedding. Then at one point she's meant to go to Italy to visit her friend who's been living there. But things don't go to plan and she misses her flights and she stays in Ireland with her brother, who she's been fighting with all summer for reasons that unfold. And she meets his Irish friend and she thinks he's cute. You can see that he likes the girl, like, throughout the whole book, but they're both dealing with things throughout the whole book. I would say this book's more about self-love and acceptance and coming to terms with what ends up happening at the end. It's not coming to terms with trauma, but she kind of like she brings herself back from a dark place. Not quite, almost, I don't know. It's a little bit hard to explain because the blurb is actually different from what it ended up being. Not in a bad way, but yeah. Towards the end, there was more romance. But this one just likes all the kissing and the hugging and the hand touching, well, accidental touching, then purposeful touching in like an innocent way. Cool your jets. Yeah. There was a lot of family issues that it dealt with. And I've mentioned before that they're not typically my thing, but between the main character and her brother, it was nice to see the struggles that they were going through to find their way back to where they were beforehand, and they fall into like a natural banter. Anyway, there was that. And then is the poetry collection. It is Goddess of the Hunt by Shelby Aline. Yes? Yes. I gave this 3 stars. This is a self-published poetry collection. Poetry is typically harder than prose. I mean, with prose and building a whole story, and if you're doing fantasy, it's hard to build a whole world and be so precise about it that it conveys properly on the page that you want it to. But poetry is hard because you have to be so concise, so succinct, concise and succinct words that I cannot pronounce. I can say concise. I can't say this other one. It missed the mark on a fair few of the poems. There were great ideas. There were great explorations of self-identity, gender, romance, sexuality. What's the other one that I'm looking for? Like it dived into asexuality as well, I believed. Anyway, I just thought they could have been more polished. They could have been more honed down to the point. And I know that it's becoming more acceptable, but it falls under the Insta poetry title. Poems without punctuation. There's nothing wrong with it to a certain extent, but the whole point of writing poems and then introduction of punctuation or the lack thereof, it's supposed to say something. It's supposed to have a point, basically. Everything you do in a poem's supposed to mean something. Like every letter, basically, every word, every line break, every stanza break, every punctuation mark, it's supposed to be doing something. I've gotten in trouble before for having a lack of grammar, so I think it's just kind of from my own experiences. When I see a lot of poetry that has no punctuation, I'm just like, if they were in my shoes, in my class, they would have gotten in trouble. So that's just kind of what goes in my head when I read poetry that typically has no punctuation. And I know it's a stylistic choice, but I just think it's too widespread to continue to be a stylistic choice. Like, it doesn't say laziness, but it kind of says... It's not that they haven't thought about the poetry, it's they haven't overthought it. And I feel like you have to overthink poetry to... I don't know, my head is all whacked up right now, apparently. And I've gone on for so long about books, so we'll get to the last book, which was Catching Fire. I rated it 5 stars and passed. I don't think that's changed. I didn't realize how quickly it moves over the events that happen in the book, which I'm a little annoyed about because I like story, I like description, I like building. But I will stand by my opinion that it's still the best of the trilogy because Katniss and Peter, I like the Court of Quel's arena, even though it's a bit weird to say because it's literally a torture device. Why do I have preferences? I just do. I mean, I find it more exciting. The idea is more exciting than what happens in the first book, the 74th Hunger Games. It's the introduction of Finnick. Beautiful. The friendship that starts to bloom between Finnick and Katniss, yes. Oh my gosh. I've spoken about this somewhere else, I think, that the whole point of the books is not to be too romantic, because it's not YA romance, it's YA dystopian, da 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 da. But I just want more of Katniss and Peter. And then it just, my heart was broken the first time I read Mockingjay. I don't think I've reread it, but in Mockingjay, they're just so sad for like the whole book. Ah. Anyway, there should have been 2 more books on this list. So I read majority of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen in April, but I didn't finish it in April, so now I have to read it in May. And then, idiot me, I recorded a video which I haven't edited or uploaded yet, and probably won't be for a little while. This will most likely go up before that video, where I talked about my personal comfort books, and I talked about Hunger Games in that one, or Catching Fire in that one, and I talked about Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater, and it brought back memories. So I messed up and I started to reread it. I told myself I was only going to read up until when Sam shows up and they kiss for the first. It just, every time it got pushed back, I was like, okay, I'll stop reading when Sam's introduced. Okay, Sam's introduced. I'll stop reading after they get back from the hospital. I'll read up until when they first kiss. I'll read up until, yeah, I'm just gonna finish it. But I didn't finish it in April. So now I've got to read it in May. May, the month where I already have 9 books on my TBR, and I just messed around and made it 11. I read 10 books in 2 months, and 2 of those were short, one being short story, one being poetry collection. How did I screw up this badly? I'm gonna die in May. And if I end up reading all of those books, I'm probably just gonna have to do a May wrap up on its own, because no way would I be able to talk about 11 books. It won't even have, it's not going to be 11 books if I do 2 months of reading, because I doubt I'm not going to read in June. So I've spent so long talking about just these 10 here, so I can't imagine the May wrap up plus another month being short. I've messed up, but here we are. And those were my books. Those are the books that I read the last 2 months. I just want to read, but uni is ending soon and I have so much work still to do. Just want to read. Okay. That is it. That's it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed all of this rambling, and I feel like at some point there was an existential crisis, maybe in the last 3 seconds. That's when it happened. But I'm feeling not how I was when I started this video. That being said, I think that might be because I need to eat lunch, maybe. Yep. What was I gonna say? Probably just closing this video. Okay. I hope you have a lovely day. I need to stop screwing up my outros, but you know, add some flavor, spicy. Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna shut up. Bye.